Hello.
They say love blinds you to red flags. As a successful businessman, I thought I was too smart to be fooled. Then I met Joanna, beautiful, charming, and hiding secrets that would nearly destroy everything I built. My mother saw it coming, but some lessons can only be learned the hard way. This is my warning to men who trust too easily. My name is Derek. I'm 35 years old, and until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. I own a successful construction company in Denver that I built from the ground up. I've got a nice house in the suburbs with a view of the mountains, and enough savings to feel comfortable. My life wasn't perfect, but it was stable, something I'd worked damn hard for. My friends used to joke that the only thing missing was someone to share it with. I dated here and there, but nothing serious. And then I met Joanna, and everything changed. It was at my buddy Mike's 4th of July barbecue. The kind with too many beers, burgers on the grill, and sparklers before the fireworks. She walked in wearing a blue summer dress, and man, I couldn't take my eyes off her. 28, smart as a whip, with this laugh that could light up the whole backyard. Mike introduced us, mentioning she was new to his marketing department. Derek builds things, he said. Joanna destroys marketing goals. We hit it off immediately. I told her about the historic renovation my company had just landed, and instead of her eyes glazing over, she asked intelligent questions. 3 hours felt like 3 minutes. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers, and I was already thinking about where I'd take her for dinner. My mother, Regina, has always had this sixth sense about people. At 60, she's still sharp as a tack, running her bookkeeping business and volunteering at the local shelter. When I brought Joanna to Sunday dinner a few weeks later, I could tell Mom was reserving judgment. She was polite. Regina Matthews doesn't know how to be anything but a perfect hostess. But there was something in her eyes when Joanna started talking about her 5-year plan. She seems ambitious, Mom said carefully after Joanna left. We were cleaning dishes together, like we always did after Sunday meals. That's what I like about her, I replied. She knows what she wants. Mom just nodded and squeezed my hand. Just take your time, honey. There's no rush when it's right. But there was a rush. At least, I felt it. Being with Joanna was like catching a perfect wave, exhilarating, powerful, and I didn't want it to end. Within 6 months, I was ring shopping, ignoring the fact that she'd started asking more questions about my business finances than my day, ignoring how she'd check out whenever Mom talked about family traditions, ignoring how her girls' nights seemed to multiply, and she'd come home with stories that didn't quite add up. Looking back, I should have listened to my mother. But then again, when do we ever? The first real fight Joanna and I had was about my mother. We'd been dating for about 4 months when Regina invited us to her 60th birthday celebration, a small gathering at her favorite steakhouse. Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends. Do we have to go? Joanna asked, not even looking up from her phone. I already told Melissa we'd check out that new rooftop bar downtown. I put down the newspaper I was reading and stared at her. It's my mother's birthday, Joe. Of course we're going. She rolled her eyes. Your mom doesn't even like me. Don't think I don't notice how she watches everything I do. That pushed a button. Maybe because deep down I knew Mom's concerns weren't completely unfounded. Look, my mother raised me alone after my dad walked out. She worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have the business I have today. So yeah, her birthday is non-negotiable. Joanna looked surprised. It was probably the first time I put my foot down about anything. Usually I was the easygoing one, letting her choose the restaurants, the movies, the weekend plans. Fine, she huffed. But you owe me. The dinner went as well as could be expected. Joanna put on her charming face, but I caught the tight smiles and the frequent bathroom breaks to check her phone. Mom noticed too. I could tell by the way she squeezed my arm when we said goodbye. She's got a strong personality, Mom said, carefully choosing her words. Just make sure there's room for yours too. That comment stuck with me, especially when 2 weeks later, I made the decision that would change everything. We were having dinner at my place when Joanna started talking about moving in together. My lease is up next month, she said, twirling pasta around her fork. And it makes sense financially. Why pay 2 rents when we spend most nights together anyway? She wasn't wrong, but something made me hesitate. Maybe it was Mom's warning. Maybe it was how Joanna's girls' nights had become more frequent, or how defensive she got when I asked about her new friends, especially someone named Eric who kept liking all our Instagram posts. Actually, I heard myself saying, I was thinking more along the lines of marriage. The word surprised even me. But once they were out, I knew they were right. I wasn't a halfway kind of guy. If we were doing this, we were doing it properly. Joanna's fork stopped midway to her mouth. Marriage? Seriously? Yes, seriously. I reached across the table and took her hand. I love you, Joe. I want to build a life with you. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, calculation, I couldn't tell. Then she smiled, that dazzling smile that had first caught my attention at Mike's barbecue. Derek Matthews, are you proposing to me over spaghetti? I laughed, tension broken. No, but I'm giving you a heads up that it's coming. A real proposal. Ring, fancy dinner, the whole 9 yards. She leaned across the table and kissed me. Yes. The answer is yes. What I didn't tell her was that I'd already bought the ring, or that I'd decided to make her sign a prenup on my lawyer's and my mother's insistence. That conversation would come later, and it wouldn't go nearly as smoothly. But in that moment, I felt like I'd made the right call. I had no idea what was coming. The engagement party was my mother's idea. Traditional values still matter, she insisted, and I couldn't argue with that. We held in the backyard of my house, strung up lights in the oak trees, and Regina made her famous brisket. Everything was perfect, except Joanna's mood. Your mother went overboard again, she muttered as she sipped champagne. All these relatives asking about wedding dates and babies. It's suffocating. I was about to respond when I noticed Mike's expression from across the yard. He was watching Joanna with this strange look of pity. He quickly turned away when our eyes met. I'll be right back, I told Joanna, making my way over to him. Mike tried to deflect with small talk about the Broncos, but I've known him since 3rd grade. Spit it out, buddy. What's going on? He sighed, taking a long pull from his beer. Look, this isn't the time or place. Mike, my voice had an edge I rarely used. Fine. He pulled me behind the garage, away from the party noise. There's been talk at the office. About Joanna and Eric from sales. My stomach tightened. What kind of talk? Late meetings. Lunch breaks that stretched too long. He hesitated. A couple people saw them at the Greystone last week. That's not exactly a business lunch spot. The Greystone was a boutique hotel downtown. My hands clenched involuntarily. They could have been meeting clients, I said, not believing it myself. Mike just looked at me, the way he did when we were kids, and I was making excuses for striking out in Little League. Maybe, but I thought you should know. I rejoined the party, watching Joanna laugh with her girlfriends, the same ones who took her out on those increasing girls' nights. I noticed how often she checked her phone, angling the screen away from view. Later that night, after everyone left, I found myself standing in our bedroom doorway, watching her remove her makeup. I wanted to confront her, demand the truth. But what if Mike was wrong? What if this was nothing but office gossip? Your friends seem nice, I said instead. Especially that blonde one. Tiffany. Melissa, she corrected, not meeting my eyes in the mirror. Yeah, she's great. Works in pharmaceutical sales. And the one with the red hair? Joanna's hand paused briefly. That's Kara. You met her before at Mike's barbecue. I hadn't, but I let it slide. You guys go out a lot these days. Her shoulders tensed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, backing down like I always did when she got defensive. Just an observation. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. For the first time, I questioned whether I really knew the woman I'd asked to marry me. But instead of confronting those doubts, I pushed them down deep. I'd proposed. We'd announced it to the world. I was committed, and Derek Matthews didn't go back on his word. Looking back, that stubborn pride would cost me everything. The prenup conversation went exactly as I expected, which is to say, terribly. You don't trust me, Joanna accused, pacing our living room. After everything we've built together. It's not about trust, I explained for the 3rd time. It's about protecting both of us. My business has investors, partners. I have responsibilities. To everyone but me, apparently. Her eyes narrowed. Did your mother put you up to this? I felt my patience slipping. Leave my mother out of it. This was my decision. Sure it was. She grabbed her purse. I need some air. Don't wait up. She slammed the door behind her. I stood there, feeling the weight of Mike's warning pressing down on me. Before I could think better of it, I took out my phone and pulled up our cell phone account. As the primary account holder, I could see all calls and texts. What I found made my blood run cold. Dozens of calls to the same number, often late at night or during her girls' nights. Texts coming in at all hours. I didn't recognize the number, but my gut told me exactly who it belonged to. I wasn't raised to snoop or invade someone's privacy, but I also wasn't raised to be played for a fool. I made a decision right then that would change everything. I called my buddy Charlie, who worked in private security. "I need a favor," I said when he answered. "Nothing illegal, just information." 2 days later, Charlie sent me a text. "The Greystone, room 412, 8 p.m. tonight." I left work early, drove home, and sat in my truck outside her house. Sure enough, at 6:30, Joanna emerged, dressed to kill in a black dress I'd never seen before. I followed her at a distance, watching as she drove downtown and valeted her car at the Greystone. I gave her 20 minutes, then walked into the lobby and took the elevator to the 4th floor. Standing outside room 412, I heard her laugh, that same laugh that had captivated me at Mike's barbecue, now directed at someone else. I didn't knock. I used the keycard Charlie had somehow acquired and pushed the door open. There she was, wrapped around a dark-haired man I recognized from company photos as Eric from sales. Their expressions of shock would have been comical under different circumstances. "Derek." Joanna scrambled off the bed, tugging her dress down. "This isn't. Save it." My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. "We're done." Eric started to speak, but one look from me silenced him. I'd never considered myself an intimidating man, but something in my expression must have conveyed the rage boiling beneath my surface. "I want your things out of my house by tomorrow," I told Joanna. "The engagement is off. Don't call me, don't text me, don't come in my office." I turned and walked out, ignoring her calls behind me. In the elevator, I removed her ring from my pocket. I'd been carrying it for days, somehow knowing this moment was coming. The 3-carat diamond caught the light, mocking everything it was supposed to represent. In the hotel bar, I ordered a whiskey and called my mother. When she answered, I didn't bother with hello. "You were right," I said, "about everything." I spent the next week in a fog, going through motions at work, barely eating, hardly sleeping. My crew noticed, but knew better than to ask. The ring sat in my desk drawer, a $15,000 reminder of my blindness. 3 days after the Greystone incident, Joanna started the campaign. First came the tearful voicemails, begging forgiveness, claiming Eric meant nothing. When those went unanswered, she switched tactics. "You're overreacting," she texted. "It was one mistake. We can work through this." One mistake. As if I hadn't seen the hotel receipts, the call logs, the pattern that had been right in front of me for months. When I remained silent, she escalated to threats. "I've invested a year of my life in you." Her final message read, "I deserve compensation." That's when I called my lawyer. "She's got nothing," Howard assured me over coffee. "No marriage, no joint property, no legal claim to your business. She's fishing." I nodded, relieved but still uneasy. "I want this over with, Howard. Whatever it takes." That afternoon, I drove to my mother's house. Regina was in the garden, pruning roses with the same focus she brought to everything. She looked up as I approached, her eyes softening. "You doing okay, honey?" I knelt beside her, picking up fallen petals. "Getting there. Lawyer says she can't touch the business." Mom nodded, setting down her shears. "That's good. But I wasn't asking about the business." For the first time since that night at the Greystone, I felt the full weight of what had happened. The betrayal, the lost future, the public humiliation. My eyes burned. "I should have listened to you," I managed. Mom took my hand, her gardening gloves rough against my skin. "We see what we want to see, Derek. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." We sat in silence, surrounded by half-pruned roses. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me. "How did you know about Joanna?" Mom considered this. It wasn't one thing. It was how she'd look past you when you were talking. How she'd check her phone when she thought no one was watching. How she'd mention your business success to strangers within minutes of meeting them. She squeezed my hand. She never saw you. She saw what you could give her. That night, I sat on my back deck, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. My phone buzzed. A text from Mike. "Beer? Broncos game this weekend." Simple. Normal. Life continuing. "Yeah," I typed back, "I'll bring the steaks." For the first time in weeks, I felt something like peace. Joanna had taken a year of my life, but she wouldn't get another day. The unexpected call came on a Thursday, 2 months after the breakup. "Mr. Matthews, this is Dr. Levinson's office. We have Joanna Miller here. She's listed you as her emergency contact." My first instinct was to hang up, another manipulation tactic. But something in the nurse's voice stopped me. "What happened?" "She fainted at work. She's asking for you." I almost said no. Almost. But that's not who I am. 30 minutes later, I was at Denver Memorial, following a nurse to a curtained area in the ER. Joanna looked smaller somehow, pale against the hospital sheets. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "You came. What's going on, Joe?" Before she could answer, a doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Miller, your blood work confirms our suspicion. You're pregnant, about 10 weeks along." The room seemed to tilt. 10 weeks. That would mean. "I'll give you 2 a moment," the doctor said, slipping away. Joanna's eyes filled with tears. "Derek, is it mine?" The question came out harsher than intended. She flinched. "Yes. I know what you're thinking, but yes, it's yours." I studied her face, searching for the lies I'd missed for so long. "How can I possibly believe you?" "You can request a paternity test," she said quietly. "I'll consent to anything." I paced the small space, mind racing. A baby. My baby, possibly. Everything I thought was settled suddenly wasn't. "What do you want from me, Joanna?" She wiped her eyes. "Nothing. I'm keeping the baby, but I don't expect anything from you. I just thought you should know." I left the hospital with her discharge papers and more questions than answers. Driving home, I called Howard. "I need to know about paternity tests. How soon they can be done. How accurate they are." Howard was silent for a moment. "Derek, tread carefully here. Child support is one thing, but if you get involved emotionally before confirming paternity—" "I know the risks," I interrupted. "But if there's a chance this is my child, I need to know." That night, I sat across from my mother at her kitchen table, explaining the situation. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked when I finished. I considered this, that she's manipulative enough to lie about this, but also that I need to be certain. Mom nodded, reaching for my hand. "Then you know what to do. And whatever happens, you'll handle it with integrity. That's who you are." I drove home with a strange mix of dread and determination. The next morning, I scheduled the earliest possible paternity test and called Joanna. "I'll support you through the pregnancy," I told her. "But we're doing a DNA test the minute it's safe for the baby." "That's fair," she agreed, too quickly. "Thank you, Derek." After hanging up, I stared at the phone, wondering if I just made the biggest mistake of my life or narrowly avoided it. The weeks that followed were a careful dance. I provided financial support for Joanna's prenatal care, but maintained emotional distance. We communicated through texts and occasional phone calls, clinical exchanges about doctor's appointments and test results. Regina was skeptical. "Be careful, Derek. A baby is the ultimate trap." "I know, Mom, but I can't just walk away from my own child." "If it is yours," she reminded me gently. The doubt gnawed at me constantly. During a routine checkup in her 5th month, the doctor mentioned something that caught my attention. "The baby's development is right on track for 14 weeks, he said, reviewing the ultrasound. I frowned. 14 weeks? I thought she was 20 weeks along. The doctor looked confused, glancing between us. "No, definitely 14 weeks. Conception would have been around mid-February." Mid-February, when Joanna claimed we'd reconciled after a fight and spent the weekend together. Except I was in Seattle that weekend, at a construction conference with 20 witnesses. I said nothing during the appointment. Drove Joanna home in silence, my mind calculating dates, remembering alibis. As she reached for the door handle, I finally spoke. "The baby's not mine, is it?" Her hand froze. "What are you talking about?" "Mid-February conception. I was in Seattle, remember? The Patterson Project pitch." She blinked rapidly, that familiar calculation happening behind her eyes. "The doctor's wrong about the dates. It happens all the time." "Stop lying, Joanna. It's Eric's baby, isn't it?" Her expression shifted, defiance replacing panic. "So what if it is? You've got money. He doesn't. This child deserves a good life." The coldness of her logic stunned me. "You were going to let me raise another man's child. Let me believe it was mine. You would have never known the difference. And we could have been happy." She reached for my arm. We still can be. I pulled away, disgust washing over me. Does Eric know? Her silence was answer enough. Get out of my car, I said quietly. Derek, please. Get out. The force of my shout surprised even me. She scrambled out, and I drove away before she reached her door. At a red light, I pulled out my phone and blocked her number. Then I called Howard. She lied about the conception date. I explained. The baby can't be mine. We'll still need to document this properly, Howard cautioned. But if you're certain about the timeline, you're in the clear. That night, I drove to Regina's house, explained everything over glasses of her blackberry wine. She didn't say I told you so. She just pulled me into a hug like when I was a kid. You're going to be okay, she whispered. Better than okay. For the first time, I actually believed it. 3 days after discovering Joanna's deception, Eric called me. We need to talk, he said, his voice tight. We met at a diner on neutral ground. He looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. She told me about the baby, he said, turning a coffee mug in his hands. After you confronted her, I waited, feeling nothing but mild curiosity about what this man could possibly want from me. I'm sorry, he continued, for the affair. I didn't know how serious you two were. That's between you and your conscience, I replied coolly. Why did you want to meet? He looked up, his expression pained. I need to know. Are you going to support her? Because I can't. I'm already paying child support for 2 kids from my first marriage. I can barely make rent. The audacity almost made me laugh. Let me get this straight. You sleep with my fiancée, get her pregnant, and now you want to know if I'll foot the bill. He had the decency to look ashamed. I know how it sounds. It sounds like not my problem. I stood, dropping cash for my untouched coffee. You two deserve each other. As I reached the door, he called after me. She told people at work the baby's yours. She's still wearing the engagement ring. I turned back. What ring? The diamond. She's been showing it off, saying you reconciled. Ice ran through my veins. I'd never gotten a ring back. Hadn't even thought about it in the chaos of the past months. That afternoon, I marched into Mike's marketing department. Conversation stopped as I walked to Joanna's desk. She looked up, startled, instinctively covering her left hand. Too late, I said. Give me the ring. Derek, this isn't the place. Now, Joanna, or I call security and report stolen. Her colleagues were watching openly now. Slowly, she removed the 3-carat diamond and placed it in my outstretched palm. You didn't have to embarrass me, she hissed. You're right, I agreed. I could have pressed charges instead. Walking out, I nodded to Mike, who stood in his office doorway, visibly uncomfortable but nodding in approval. That evening, I sat with Regina on her porch, the ring box open between us. What will you do with it? She asked. I considered the diamond, no longer seeing promises, but merely a valuable stone. Sell it. Donate the money to that shelter you volunteer at. Mom smiled. Always making something good from something bad. That's your gift, Derek. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt truly free. The hurricane named Joanna had passed, and I was still standing. 6 months after the ring confrontation, life had settled into a new rhythm. The construction company was thriving. We'd landed 2 major contracts that kept my crews busy and the profits flowing. I bought a new truck, renovated my kitchen, and even started training for a half marathon. Things I'd put off while caught in Joanna's drama. Regina had been my rock throughout. Our Sunday dinners became sacred again, sometimes joined by Mike and his wife, occasionally by other friends who'd respected my need for space during the breakup. You seem good, Mom observed one evening as we grilled steaks in her backyard. More like yourself. I nodded, flipping a ribeye. I feel good. Like I dodged a bullet. She hesitated, then handed me a business card. Caroline Winters. She's the daughter of my book club friend Helen. Divorced, no kids, runs her own accounting firm. I raised an eyebrow. You're setting me up now. Just putting the option out there, she said innocently. She's coming to the Labor Day barbecue. No pressure. Mom. Derek Matthews. I'm not suggesting you marry the woman. Just talk to her. She's smart, independent, and according to Helen, makes a killer bourbon pecan pie. I tucked the card in my pocket, not committing either way. Labor Day arrived with perfect Colorado weather. Crisp morning giving way to sunny, mild afternoon. I arrived at Mom's early to help set up, arranging chairs and firing up the grill like I'd done every year since high school. Guests trickled in, neighbors, Mom's church friends, a few of my crew members with their families. I was flipping burgers when I noticed her. Tall, auburn hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, laughing at something Mom had said. Caroline. Had to be. Our eyes met across the yard, and she gave a small, knowing smile that told me she'd been briefed too. Normally, this would have annoyed me. The setup, the expectations. But something about her direct gaze and confident posture intrigued me. I handed the spatula to Mike. Take over for a few minutes. He followed my line of sight and grinned. Go get him, Tiger. Our conversation started awkwardly. Mutual admissions that we'd been set up, jokes about meddling mothers. But it quickly evolved into something genuine. Caroline was sharp, funny, grounded. She asked thoughtful questions about my business without the calculating gleam I'd grown to recognize in Joanna's eyes. So, she said finally, taking a sip of lemonade, Helen mentioned you have quite a story. Bad breakup. I hesitated, then decided on honesty. Engagement. Ended when I caught her cheating, followed by some drama involving a fake pregnancy. I waited for the sympathy tilt of the head, the awkward platitudes. Instead, Caroline nodded matter-of-factly. Been there. My ex-husband had a whole second girlfriend in Cincinnati. Found out when she called me, thinking I was his sister. She shrugged. Life's too short for people who don't know what loyalty means. For the first time in over a year, I felt that spark, not just attraction, but recognition. Here was someone who understood, who'd been through fire and emerged stronger. We exchanged numbers before she left, with plans to meet for coffee the following week. As I watched her drive away, Mom appeared at my side. Well, she prompted. I grinned. You win this round, Regina Matthews. 2 years to the day after discovering Joanna's betrayal of the Greystone, I found myself back in a hotel. This time the Grand Summit, with Caroline beside me as we celebrated our 6-month anniversary. To new beginnings, she said, raising her champagne glass. And to your mother, for her not-so-subtle matchmaking. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. She still reminds me at least once a month that she saved me from eternal bachelorhood. The journey to this moment hadn't been simple. After our coffee date, Caroline and I took things deliberately slow. Both once burned, twice cautious. We dated for 3 months before exclusivity, another 2 before meeting each other's families. Though she'd already met Regina, of course. I'd learned to watch for the signs, to trust my instincts. Caroline had done the same. We compared notes on red flags we'd ignored in past relationships, creating a foundation of transparency that made everything else easier. Have you heard anything about Joanna lately? Caroline asked, tracing the rim of her glass. She never shied away from my past, viewing it as part of what made me who I am. Mike mentioned she moved to Phoenix with some sales guy. Not Eric, someone new. I shrugged. Doesn't matter anymore. And it truly didn't. The anger had faded months ago, replaced by a strange gratitude. Without that painful lesson, I might never have recognized what real partnership looked like when it finally appeared. After dinner, we walked the hotel gardens, stopping at a bench overlooking the city lights. The weight of the small box in my jacket pocket felt right, not anxiety-inducing like last time. You're quiet, Caroline observed. Everything okay? Better than okay. I turned to face her. I've been thinking about something Mom said recently, about how sometimes you have to go through the wrong doors to find the right one. Her eyes widened slightly as I slid off the bench onto one knee. I'm not the same man I was 2 years ago, I continued, pulling out the emerald-cut diamond we'd chosen together during a hypothetical jewelry store visit last month. I'm better, stronger, more certain of what I want. And what I want, Caroline Winters, is a lifetime with you. Her hands trembled slightly as she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Absolutely yes. Later that night, I called Regina to share the news. When she answered, I could hear the knowing smile in her voice. Let me guess, she said before I could speak. She said yes. Was there ever any doubt? Not for a second, honey. Her voice softened. You found a good one. I'm proud of you. As I hung up, Caroline emerged from the bathroom, engagement ring catching the light. She was everything Joanna wasn't. Honest, independent, kind. But I wouldn't have recognized those qualities without first learning their absence. What are you thinking about? She asked, sitting beside me. Just that sometimes the worst mistakes lead to the best decisions. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Then I'm grateful for all our wrong turns. They brought us to the right place. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Bye.